Now I call on the Canadian Federation of Students, Ontario, to come forward, please. Good afternoon. You have 10 minutes for your presentation. There may be up to 5 minutes of questioning following that. And I would ask you to identify yourself for the purposes of our recording. Hansard.
Thank you. My name is Jesse Greener, and I'm the Ontario Chairperson for the Canadian Federation of Students. The Federation represents more than 300,000 college and university students in Ontario and more than 500,000 across Canada. The last time we presented to government, we had a slick PowerPoint presentation. The last time we presented to government, we had reviewed extensively the research demonstrating the adverse effects of high tuition fees and the limitations of student financial aid. The last time we presented to government, we were completely ignored, and our recommendations against introducing new fees have been ignored, and those fees have increased even more sharply than under Ernie Eves. This government's promising new start is now a disaster for students and their families. All of the evidence shows that the decision to cancel the tuition fee freeze will eliminate educational opportunities, increase financial hardship on students and their families, and it is totally out of step with the voters in this province. In fact, when it comes to this government's current policy on tuition fees, it is indistinguishable from that of Mike Harris. I want to read to you a choice quote from the Ontario Legislature from 1997 when Mike Harris was preparing to remove all limits on tuition fee increases for graduate and professional programs. There comes a point in time when post-secondary education becomes something that's out of reach. Some people believe that increasing student assistance is a solution, but I can tell you that I've had the opportunity to review some studies that have come from other jurisdictions, and they show that notwithstanding the amount of student assistance, in the face of exceedingly high tuition fees, there are many, many students, and this is documented, who would say to themselves, I'm not comfortable graduating with that size of a debt load. That wasn't a quote from Vicky Smallman, the Ontario chairperson of the Canadian Federation of Students at that time. Those words belong to then opposition leader Dalton McGuinty. Today, the McGuinty government is supporting Mike Harris's massive tuition fee increases by refusing to undo them and even heaping substantial increases on top. Consider this. In 1990, tuition fees for undergraduate students were averaging at $1,680. With the cancellation of the tuition fee freeze this year, tuition fees are about to surpass $5,200. The tripling of tuition fees for university students represents an increase that is 4 times faster than the rate of inflation. The result has been a steady downloading of college and university operating costs onto the backs of students and their families. For example, tuition fees now make up almost half of the operating costs at universities, up from 20% in 1990. The predictable result of such a tuition fee policy is that student debt has skyrocketed, that in the last 15 years, student debt has tripled, and with the latest rounds of tuition fee increases, it is poised to hit $28,000 after a 4-year degree. Steep tuition fee increases in the last decade resulted in a stagnation of Ontario's enrollment growth, at a time when 70% of new jobs required some form of post-secondary education. In other provinces such as Quebec and Newfoundland Labrador, where a different approach was taken, sustained tuition fee freezes and tuition fee rollbacks have resulted in significant enrollment growth. This government's Reaching Higher plan for more student debt is a threat to Canadian values of social and economic opportunity. But students aren't alone in our concern that this government's cancellation of the tuition fee freeze. In a public opinion poll released earlier this fall, nearly 90% of Ontario voters believe that this move will compromise accessibility to post-secondary education. What's more, nearly 3/4 of voters see this cancellation of the tuition fee freeze as a broken promise. Since just the beginning of the fall semester, students have collected nearly 45,000 petition signatures calling on Ontario members of provincial parliament to immediately roll back tuition fees to 2004 levels and restore the tuition fee freeze. These petitions are being circulated and collected in Thunder Bay, Windsor, Ottawa, the Greater Toronto Area, and all points in between, and they signify widespread appeal from students and the community members to reconsider the Reaching Higher plan for tuition fee increases. High tuition fees also undermine the financial aid system itself. In fact, even when the investments of financial aid is finally realized from this government, tuition fees will result in a clawback of $1.30 for every new dollar invested. Much ado has been made about the student access guarantee. Unfortunately, there's absolutely nothing concrete in place that will ensure access for those students who cannot afford today's high tuition fees and graduating debt. Former Minister Cunningham used to recite banal promises that every willing and qualified student on the one hand would receive some form of guarantee, while on the other hand introducing some of Canada's most destructive educational policies. So you'll have to excuse our cynicism towards this used furniture sales approach. Similarly, the rhetoric about improvements to quality financed by higher tuition fees amount to pure fiction. The Higher Education Quality Council of Ontario is little more than a project on paper at this point. Student-to-faculty ratios, one of the only quantitative measurements of quality, demonstrate that the classroom experience is degrading rapidly. At 24 students for every faculty member, we are well behind where we were just 10 years ago, when the student-to-faculty ratio was 18:1. And we all remember the debilitating strike that the college system experienced as a result of ballooning classroom sizes and the inability of faculty members to meet their teaching obligations. In addition to all of this, higher tuition fees are forcing more students than ever into the workforce, causing them to lose focus on their studies, miss scholarship opportunities, and compromise their ability to continue on with postgraduate work. It is no wonder that in a recent poll, 70% of Ontarians saw quality either stagnating or declining. Only 10% of Ontarians thought that quality had increased. The McGuinty government's move to reinvest $6.2 billion into post-secondary education was long overdue and received praise as a first step when it was first announced. But let's be clear, without further commitment, this amounts to treading water relative to other provinces who continue to invest. Even with this investment, Ontario's post-secondary students are being shortchanged by one of the shamefully lowest per capita funding in all of North America. Contrary to the PR message of reaching higher, we are at best reaching for mediocrity. And we'll be lucky if past funding commitments will even bring us to the national average by 2009-10. In the first year of the freeze, this government invested $50 million. The cancellation of the tuition fee freeze this year has resulted in students and their families forking out $130 million more in tuition fees this year alone. With the real value of wages decreasing and family savings drying up, these are burdens that families cannot and should not have to shoulder. When we compare these numbers to the $6.2 billion invested in post-secondary education, the nearly $7 billion from the Canada-Ontario Agreement, roughly $2 billion of which should be dedicated to post-secondary education alone, and the $1 billion from the 2005 Bill C-48 budget amendment, students get the distinct impression that the projected $300 million surplus is being generated on our backs. I'm here today on behalf of the over 300,000 college and university students in Ontario to ask you to take corrective action in the 2007 Ontario budget by reinvesting in post-secondary education to ensure affordability and quality. With this funding, we are calling for tuition fees to be rolled back to 2004 levels and a restoration of the tuition fee freeze. We are calling for access to OSAP to be improved, especially for part-time students who are completely shut out of financial aid opportunities, and for the number of upfront needs-based grants to be doubled. I have stood before many of you in the past and made the case for restoring the tuition fee freeze in Ontario and turning Ontario's post-secondary education into a model of affordability and quality, rather than a cautionary tale. My recommendations here today reflect the views and concerns of students, and they are broadly and deeply supported by the vast majority of voters in this province. Whether you choose to listen to the electorate and act in the interest of economic prosperity and social equality is obviously up to you. But this is an election year, and the vote will be conducted while classes are in session. The students of this province have committed to one another to organize like never before, to raise public concern and support for affordability of post-secondary education. We are committed to making this an election issue, and we are committed to bringing students and youth to the polls in record numbers. And I would like to report back to the hundreds of thousands of students that I represent, to our parents, and to our coalition partners that this government has recognized the flaws of the Reaching Higher plan by rolling back the tuition fee increases and restoring the tuition fee freeze that they want, expect, and deserve. Thank you.
And thank you.